Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 196, cover dated August 1985. So this is an eye-catching, well-designed cover by John Romita Jr., inked by Terry Austin. And of course in the foreground we've got Wolverine's fist with his claws popped. And we have the figure, and we've recently learned about her dystopian future background, Rachel, in the Hound costume, and she is holding by the lapels of Shadowcat's costume. Shadowcat here, and it looks like the defeated bodies of the X-Men, Rogue, Storm, Colossus here, and even Nightcrawler back there with his little pointy ear and forked tail. So it's a degree of artistic license that's gone into this scene, because we don't see anything like this in the issue itself, but the implication is that Rachel has reverted to her Hound persona and betrayed the X-Men. But what I really like is the concept of this cover, where we've got the shadow of Wolverine cast here by a searchlight, and I like the way that the searchlight, even the colouring of it even makes its way onto the cover logo as well there, the arc of the light. That's really well done. So an interesting, memorable cover here, but unrelated to what actually happens in the issue itself. So a little bit of a kind of a marketing trick on that particular one. So the story opens with this splash page, where the Professor X there, thinks in huge capital letters, "What was that?" And that's the title of the story. And then we've got him picking up on a thought out there in an audience that he's speaking to. We've got no choice. He knows who we are. He knows what we did. We've got to kill him. So who is targeted for murder? Well, that's something that will be explored in the particular issue. The setting is Columbia University, New York City, Advanced Psychology 317, taught by Charles Xavier, PhD. Creative team here, Chris Claremont, writer as ever, John Romita Jr. and Dan Green credited as artists. What that means is John Romita Jr. is providing pencil breakdowns, Dan Green finished art in the inks, Glynis Oliver colorist, and Tom Orzechowski letterer. So let's continue with the story here. So we have the Professor on the stage speaking to a packed auditorium, and he's thinking to himself that someone out there is planning murder, but who? And of course the Professor is one of the most powerful telepaths on the planet, so how could it be that he doesn't know which of them might be the targeted victim and which the killer? It is because his powers have been affected by his recent mugging outside the campus of the university. And here he thinks to himself and catches up any new readers or who missed those issues. "My psychic resources have been stretched so thin, I can no longer screen out other people's thoughts. To avoid being driven mad by their racket, I've been forced to use drugs to reduce my telepathic sensitivity to nearly nothing. The momentary flash contact was a fluke, but while I may be powerless, mind-blind, I'm still far from helpless. This mystery must be solved, the crime prevented." So the remainder of the issue in respect of this story point is the Professor in effect acting as a type of sleuth or detective and putting the X-Men on the case. Then we have a scene shift here to East Africa, the Serengeti Plain, because Storm has gone back to Africa, back to her roots. She has lost her mutant powers because of that weapon that Forge made, which have taken her powers away, and she's trying to get in touch with her origins again and maybe find a different path than that of a member of the X-Men. Now that's a really great establishing shot there of the Serengeti Plain by Romita Jr. An interesting choice to have Storm here in the foreground, mostly in silhouette. And then she sees a lion, and it's got a white mane, and she thinks, "He wears a silver mane, his hair matches my own, is that an omen?" And then the lion is shot in the side, and Aurora's absolutely aghast, and then she's shot. And it looks like from the art that she's shot in the head, and she falls to the ground, just like the lion. Great scene here on this page. So who's responsible for that? Well, it turns out to be the Von Strucker twins. Andrea there is the one who's shot the lion and Storm, and she says, "We've seen the last of that interfering, insufferably arrogant Kaffir witch." So a racial slur there. And that's interesting because when I saw that, I thought, okay, that's interesting. Because it's a non-English term, maybe there's a little bit of license for that. But this is the issue where we're going to see a racial slur that is supercharged with, what would we say, like prohibitions and taboos. And actually, I'd forgotten about it. And when I saw it later in the issue, I was kind of shocked that it made me think, I wonder, has that been reprinted in more recent printings of this material, whether it's the Epic collections or the Omnibus. Anyway, I'll speak more about it when I get to that particular point. So Andrea says to take the line, and they leave Storm for dead to rot on the ground. And then this scene switches back to New York City, and we've got the professor. He's gathered around him. The X-Men, they're seated in a deli there. I really like this kind of slice of life look at New York City in 1985 and the culture of the place as well. And it's so mundane just to have the X-Men sitting around a table in a deli here in their civilian costumes. And also an interesting point too is that Rogue's costume at this point, with the kind of punk aesthetic of the mid-1980s, fits in. It just looks like a civilian costume rather than a traditional superhero one. So the professor there is caught everyone up on what's happened recently. But who's this figure with the white hair and the blonde woman as well? Well, we'll get a little bit more detail on them shortly. So the professor wants the X-Men to help him figure out who's planning the murder at Columbia University. And now on this page with the classic 6-panel layout, we see who it is. It's Magneto. And Kitty here is shocked and unhappy that Magneto is sitting around the table with them. And she says here, because her thoughts aren't very charitable, Magneto is a villain. She whispers to Colossus Crumbs, not that long ago, he nearly killed me. That's Uncanny X-Men 150. How come all of a sudden we have to be nice to him? So Lee Forster there says to Magneto, she whispers to him, she's aware of what's going on the other side of the table. They look so suspicious, Magneto. The X-Men don't like you. They don't want you here. And Magneto's response is, in the past, Elitis, I've given them good reason to feel so. And that's an understatement. But Claremont has begun the rehabilitation of Magneto's character, a redemptive characterization arc for him, going all the way back to Days of Future Past, where Magneto had allied with the X-Men in the dystopian future of 2013 because of the Sentinels' genocide of mutants and superheroes as well. And of course then in that issue 150 that Kitty's thinking back to when Magneto nearly murdered her, but he paused when he saw that she was wearing a Star of David. That is the point that Claremont begins to develop this very interesting backstory from Magneto, where he was an inmate at Auschwitz and had experienced the worst of bigotry in his youth, and that begins his, as I say, like redemptive character arc under Claremont's pen. So Wolverine here is, it's interesting the way he's characterized in this issue. He's kind of quiet. Rogue picks up on the fact that something's up with him, and she says, you've been staring at the Prof all evening. You've been watching him for days. Something ailing you. And he says, maybe, maybe not. She says, I want to help. And he says, I'm obliged, Rogue, but you can't. So that's Wolverine in his typical laconic fashion. You know, like he's aware that something's up with the Professor. The Professor's not telling everybody the full extent of the damage done to him in terms of the beating he took, the mugging. So Rachel here, while the discussion is going on at the table, picks up on something elsewhere in the deli, and it is outside another 6-panel layout here, following on from the previous one, and she sees this blonde figure wearing leisure gear, I suppose, outside the deli. I like Romita Jr.'s rendering here of the customers lining up at the counter, looking at the produce there. It's nicely done, and the cured meats hanging from this rack as well. I like all of that. It really gives us a sense of place in these panels. So next of all, this figure kind of phases through the side of the building. He doesn't even open the door and comes in, and then he starts acting like a complete weirdo here, peering in at the goods behind the window or the screen here. So the deli owner says, "You a foreigner, Pally? Okay, you want something? You don't grab for it. You ask nice, say please, say thank you, that sort of thing. What's the matter? They didn't teach you nothing at home?" And then I like this. This is funny from Claremont. "Please say thank you," that sort of thing. And the deli owner here says, "You got a fella," and hands him a sandwich. So then Rachel comes up to him and she asks him, "Who are you?" She's got a notion who it might be. This is a Secret Wars 2 tie-in. And then Kitty comes up to her and says, "Who are you talking to? There's nobody there." So Rachel sees she was going to say the Beyonder, and then she stops and just says, "Gone. He vanished." So Kitty says, "No one was ever here. You were speaking to thin air." But the deli owner there says, "Hey, where's that foreign creep? He left without paying. He ripped us off. So he must have taken the sandwich too when he disappeared." And there's some bits and pieces about Nimrod going on in the background. One of the customers is saying, "Too bad Nimrod ain't here. Bet he'd teach that bum a lesson." So Nimrod's building a reputation in New York City, and I like the way that Claremont is kind of building that in the background as well. Kitty here is wondering, where's Nightcrawler? He's team leader. Now more than ever, we need him with us. So then the scene switches to St. Anne's Church on the Lower East Side. So he's in Manhattan as well. And he's come to visit a friend, Father Bone, Michael Bone. And he's got a crisis of faith, and it has to do with his encounter with the Beyonder in Secret Wars, in the first Secret Wars series. So the priest says to him, "Something seriously wrong, Kurt. I can hear it in your voice." And he says to him, "I need to talk, Michael, or I shall go mad. I fear I've beheld the face of God, only to discover that he's a monster." And so they sit down in the church kitchen there, and Kurt, Nightcrawler, reveals his doubts about his fate now. He says, "Father, since joining the X-Men, I've encountered beings so powerful they would seem to any of us as gods, yet compared to the Beyonder, they're nothing. What then does this make him? Is this God?" So he slams the table there. He says, "I tell myself this cannot be, but if he is not, who is? Do you understand? This creature can destroy the earth in an instant. How can the Lord permit this entity to threaten humanity and perhaps all creation until the Beyonder is God?" And he goes on and on about how his faith is being tested and how he's losing it, and says here, "Thanks to the Beyonder, I'm hollow inside, I'm lost." So interesting here. This is all part of Claremont's treatment of the X-Men as real people. And of course, Kurt Wagner is a Catholic, from Bavaria. Bavaria is a Catholic province of southern Germany, very Catholic. And that's his faith, and Claremont kind of takes it seriously in terms of, okay, well, if Nightcrawler encounters a being like the Beyonder, who is for all intents and purposes like omnipotent, which is a trait of God, then maybe this is how he would react. So the priest moves to comfort him, but we don't get the priest's verbal statements as regards what he would say to that, what theological arguments he might give. Nightcrawler there, we don't get any of that. Instead, we're back at the university, Columbia University. It's nighttime. Now, this is an interesting page because a page like this is one that Romita Jr. and Dan Green can produce very quickly. So this will get them, they'll be able to do a page like this in, half a day, let's say, and that will keep them moving along in respect of their deadline. But the scene is set at night. It's a darkened office. There is some sabotage going on here. There is the placement of a weapon here in Professor X's office. So how is this all going to turn out? And who is the one that was being targeted earlier in the issue on the splash page? This is a nice page as well, where we've got Rogue flying Rachel around Manhattan because, of course, the professor isn't able to use his telepathy. And so she is size scanning in terms of maybe they can get some information regarding who the murderer, the prospective murderer might be. And then they stumble upon a boy being attacked in an alleyway. So Rogue and Rachel makes short work of the attackers. And the boy here isn't grateful at all once he realizes that they're muties, as he says. And Rachel responds, "Is that important? We came to help. Get away from me." And here, look at this, more of this kind of lionization of Nimrod by the New York populace. The guy's got a I Love New York t-shirt on, and he's just graffitied the wall with Nimrod #1, muties die. So Rogue sees it. Look what the jerk was writing on the wall when he was jumped. And Rachel, of course, from that dystopian future where mutants have been genocided, says, "Your world is nowhere near as nasty as mine." Rogue was making that point earlier. "Open your eyes, Rogue. Everything I endured, all the horror, is repeating itself. Perhaps not exactly the same way, but the general trend's the same. I've already seen everyone I love and cherish slaughtered once in my life, but I won't let it happen again, never again." So she lashes out with her telekinetic power there, destroying the graffiti. And who's there observing from the shadows except the Beyonder? And he's thinking about how powerful Rachel is, and how of all the beings I've encountered on this world, he thinks to himself, she's potentially the most like me. And that's something that will get developed in the course of subsequent months and the tie-ins with Secret Wars, as Rachel becomes more and more powerful and more angry as well. So then we switch back to the law library steps, the steps up to the law library in Columbia University. And I like this upcoming scene between Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. So let's turn the page here. Another kind of memorable scene from Claremont and Romita Jr.'s run. It's not an action scene, but it's Kitty Pryde grabbing Wolverine's cigar and taking a few drags on it, and just puffing and coughing and spluttering and burping even, and handing the cigar back to him. Great work by Tom Orzechowski there, also on the speech balloon here. And she says to Wolverine, as he smiles to himself, she asks him, how can you stand that awful thing? And his response is pretty good. He says, "Acquired taste. Besides, with my fast healing power, smoking doesn't do me any harm. Same can't be said for you." And she responds, "No fear of that. This is one vice I'll skip, assuming I live," as she coughs and wheezes and the cigar falls to the ground. And I like even the detail of the watering of her eyes as well. So she talks to Wolverine then. And remember, in modern Marvel, by going back to the Bill Jemas and Joe Quesada era, when Joe Quesada was editor-in-chief, an editorial mandate was that no Marvel characters are allowed to smoke anymore. So Wolverine's no longer a smoker because of Quesada and Jemas. Their belief that Wolverine smoking cigars would tempt young readers to take up cigar smoking or cigarette smoking. How idiotic is that? In any case, back to the conversation between Kitty and Wolverine. So she asks him about Magneto and his read on Magneto. And she asks him here, I mean, did you believe for an instant that story about some stupid experiment? She's wondering whether the professor's under Magneto's control. He looks sick to me, Logan, she says. I'm really worried. Me too, Kitty. Why won't he level with us? Who knows? And Wolverine says, my instinct says Maggie's legit. As for the rest, I say trust Charlie. Play his hand through to the end. We owe him too much to do any different. So I really like this interchange between, Kitty, who's a 15-year-old teenager and much more emotional and instinct-driven, and Wolverine, who used to be all emotional and instinct-driven, having developed as a character. And he's got a cooler head now. He's more laconic. He's more patient. He's more inclined to sit back and think and see how things play out. I like that. We see the course of the development of his character, and it gives to a reader worrying about Magneto joining the X-Men, potentially joining the X-Men, it gives them an insight into, okay, well, if Wolverine developed as a character, then maybe Magneto can too. So Kitty uses her phasing power to airwalk up to the 6th floor of one of the university buildings. In there's the shadowy figure of the Beyonder observing her. She feels a chill, but she can't see him. And then she goes down one flight downstairs into the computer physics lab, because of course Kitty's taking computer courses at Columbia University. She's a Wunderkind, and she's taking those courses even though she's 15 years old. And she meets her classmates here, and they're shocked to see her. What are you doing here? And she says, I saw the lights on and figured I'd stroll up to see what was cooking. You guys running an experiment? Why didn't you tell me? I'm part of this seminar too, you know. Great colouring on these pages as well by Glynis Oliver. This scene taking place in the evening or at night. So now here we get to kind of, what would we say, like the thematic, we're getting towards the thematic climax. This whole focus on bigotry, prejudice, hatred. Kitty here playing it cool, having a slice of their pizza, and saying that getting through the locked doors was child's play. And this guy says to her, I hadn't thought of this till now, brat, but you attend Charles Xavier's private school upstate. Common knowledge, so what, she says. Then, so he says, you a mutie then, Pride, like him? Gee, I don't know, Phil. And then she says it, are you a... Now, I can't say the word here on YouTube because there'll be implications for the for this video on the channel, but you can read that word, right? It's the N word, yes? And it's written out in full. And what I want to know from you is, if you have this issue in Epic Collection or in the omnibus from last year that collects this issue, let me know, has that word been erased or turned into a different word, or is it still there in the reprint? I'd be curious to learn that, because it took me by surprise, but it is absolutely in keeping with the thematic of the issue. And it's an interesting one from Kitty, who's both Jewish and a mutant, to throw that at Phil. And of course, that sets him off. Watch your mouth, he says. And she says, watch yours. Especially when you use words like that, mutie, and try to be intentionally hurtful. All of a sudden, Phil, I don't much like you anymore, or your buddies. I think I'll be on my way. But he's not having it. He pulls a knife. And she is sprayed here by with mace, and then she is knocked out, or they attempt to knock her out with chloroform. And when Kitty can't concentrate, she can't use her powers. So she thinks to herself, stupid girl, let them get the drop on you, and now you're nailed. And this guy asks, what will we do with her, Phil? Same as with Xavier, Johnny boy, we waste the mutie. So these are the guys that are responsible for mugging Professor X some issues earlier outside the university. And then, of course, like, if the professor had his full array of psionic powers, Kitty would be able to call out to him psychically. But she can't now because he doesn't have that power. And of course, maybe a move here that the team has missed is having Rachel act as the, what would we say, like the conduit of a psychic rapport among the X-Men, whereby she would have been able to call out for aid. So here's Wolverine smoking and enjoying his cigar. And I just like this panel. It's so mundane. Just everybody just sitting there on the steps waiting for something to happen. Colossus there is thinking, or says aloud, I think we're chasing wild geese. So he's kind of got the saying a little bit off there. You know, he should be saying we're on a wild goose chase. And Wolverine says, maybe. We'll know soon enough, pal. And Rogue says, I wonder why we bother. Even if we succeed and save this mystery sod's butt. That's the guy that, whoever the victim might be, is who she's referring to. It won't make no real difference to us. We'll still be outcasts. We'll still be hated. Would I be any worse off if I'd stayed with Mystique and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants? Don't really seem so. I tell you all truthfully, if I'd known what that creep was writing on that wall, I'd have flown on by. Ray too. So yeah, so we're getting this very kind of morally grey characterization in this issue, in terms of the power of mutual hatred to make people kind of lose touch with their noble side, their good side. And this is very far away from Silver Age morality, that black and white morality, especially the morality of a Steve Ditko, let's say. So here we are, Xavier's office at Columbia University. The Beyonders there watching. Rachel sees him, but neither the professor nor Magneto see him. And when she uses her power to show them the Beyonder, she trips a size screen device. That's what was planted in the professor's office earlier. And it's designed to amplify any amount of psychic energy used in its vicinity 100-fold and reflect it back on its source. To Rachel, her senses and perceptions heightened to their ultimate extent. Her defense is equally vulnerable. It's as if her very blood has just been transformed to acid. She screams with all her heart. So what will be the result of this? Well, it's going to be explosive, yes, and there we go. So the professor and Magneto are blasted out of the professor's office. The team down here on the steps see it. Rogue catches them, and Wolverine asks Colossus for a fastball special, and he's up in the office and he sees Rachel on the ground. And he thinks to himself, what a mess. No unknown human sense nearby, no residue of cordite or plastique. I don't get it. If a bomb didn't do this, what the heck did? Unless, and then he thinks, the kid's crying, she's a telekinetic. Was she the cause? But why? So Kitty there says, Kitty, my Kate. And that's, of course, their close relationship from the dystopian future of 2013. And then she turns around and there she is in the Hound costume. This is the first time that Wolverine has seen that costume on Rachel. And he's taken aback. What are you talking about, girl? Who are you? And he thinks to himself, where'd that outfit come from? And her face. So she's got these kind of Maori tattoos on her face. And the idea there is that the tattoos are permanent, but she uses her psionic powers to make them invisible to the perception of others. But they're permanent tattoos on her face. And they were done to her. Kind of like the way that inmates of Auschwitz, like Magneto there, had the numbers tattooed on their arms as well. So that's the equivalent for Rachel, you know, because Claremont is working up to this culmination moral dialogue, or dialectic even, between Magneto and Rachel. So Rachel blasts her way into the building where Kitty's been strangled by this guy Phil. And he's planning to kill the professor as well, of course. And Rachel bursts in violently. Everybody's knocked out except for Phil there. He pulls a gun and shoots at Rachel. And she uses her TK powers, her telekinetic powers, to swing that bullet round at Phil. And the dialogue here is very interesting. She says here, you puny, pathetic human, to think you could take a telepath by surprise, or that your gun would be any threat to a telekinetic. And the way that she refers to him as a puny, pathetic human, that's the language of a supervillain, yes? And a god as well. And of course, the bullet is stopped there by whom else except for Magneto. And Phil there realizes the bullet, something's keeping it from hitting me. It's Magneto. I'm the master of magnetism, he says, a mutant. Mine is the power that holds the shell at bay. Even as the young lady struggles with all her considerable might to push it onwards. So Magneto says, Rachel, I beg you, forbear. And this is quite the turnaround, quite the volte-face for Magneto as a character. This is the way he used to speak in the Silver Age, and this is a very different Magneto now. Being written by Claremont. So Rachel here protests. It's no less than they would have cheerfully have done to us, Magneto, she says. And she lashes them with her psi powers. But Magneto has a moral case he wants to make to her. And it's this. That was, she says, in terms of what she's saying, they deserve it. They deserve punishment. He says, that was once what I believed, and see what it has achieved. I'm hunted the world over. My name has become almost a synonym for madness and evil. My children have disowned me. I'm as feared, Rachel, as I am hated. And worst of all, those whose lives I sought to safeguard, whose bright future to ensure, are no better off. Indeed, I've probably made their existence far worse. And she protests, you don't understand. These scum beat the professor like an animal. These are the killers he set us to find, unaware that he was the victim. I see the thoughts and memories in their minds. They would have murdered Kitty too if I hadn't prevented it. There's no remorse in them, no pity. We're muties, we're not real people, we're inhuman, alien things. So now is Magneto's turn to speak, the former inmate of Auschwitz, and he says, theirs is a hatred born of ignorance and fear. Will you now, by your actions, justify that fear and the hate? And she continues to protest. She says, look at what they've done to me. In these clothes, in my own era, as a hound, I hunted mutants. Humans like them made me do that, and worse. I killed Magneto, people I knew, and some and she hesitates, loved. I never wanted you or any of the X-Men to know. I couldn't bear it, but they pulled my secret from me. Thanks to them, I can't hide my shame any longer. For that, I want them to pay. And he says, as those who tormented you in the future cannot? Yes. So she wants revenge on them for what was done to her in the future. And so Magneto says, then kill him, child. Prove your superiority. Slaughter them as callously, as mercilessly as they would you. Let them see that you are no longer better than they, that you can return hate for hate, blow for blow, life for life. What are you waiting for, Rachel? Do it. He's talking about lex talionis, the law of retaliation, retribution, vengeance, payback. Give them the final victory. And that's the twist. And that's what stops her. Look at Phil here. Look at the sweat on his forehead. He's crying as well. He's being completely unmanned. But the bullet just drops to the ground. Her shoulders are slumped. And she says, Magneto, I may never forgive you for this. So then it's time to head away. She transforms back to the civilian clothes out of the hound costume. And Kitty there is, Rachel thinks that Kitty's going to give her a lecture, but she only wants to say thanks. And Rachel there responds, you're welcome. We needn't worry about these slime revealing our identities because she's telepathically wiped their memories of the X-Men. And Magneto picks up Kitty. And this is a nice turn of events as well. Thinking back to Uncanny X-Men 150 and his pausing when he saw the Star of David on Kitty's costume. That she was wearing around her neck rather. And Kitty's doubts about him earlier in the issue in the delicatessen. And now he's picking her up. And she's accepting it. It's so interesting the way that Claremont develops these characters over the course of the years. And then they walk away. And Magneto says, Kitty asks him, how did you know what to say to her? And he says, an easy task, Catherine, for one who, like Rachel, has dwelled too long in the valley of the shadow of death, in too many tragic ways. We're kindred souls, survivors of the Holocaust, children of the abyss. So interesting that Claremont bringing it all home. And then in the background, we have the Beyonder watching, and he's thinking here to himself, in my stay here on Earth, I've seen almost nothing but contradictions. These X-Men, especially the one called Rachel, are among the most puzzling conundrums. So he has this ongoing obsession and fascination with Rachel, and then he decides that he's got to become truly human. So there's a kind of like a Christian allegory subtext here, God becoming human, becoming man. That's all Jim Shooter's ideas in the background there, driving this stuff. But Claremont makes an interesting story out of it. A very reflective, serious story on the dire consequences of fear and hatred. This arch theme of the X-Men, and an interesting twist there in terms of Magneto, of all people, the original X-Man villain, talking down Rachel as she was about to become a moral, like a supervillain in her own right. And then we've got a letters page this issue, and just the interesting thing to note here is that there is an advertisement in one of the responses for an upcoming Storm and Forge limited series by Chris Claremont and Barry Windsor Smith. So that never happened, but that would have been super cool. And then there's the statement of ownership here with the circulation numbers. So here in 1985, the X-Men are selling, or rather, there's been printed over 500,000 issues. So 560,000 odd issues. are being printed of the title. So it's going up in sales as well. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on the Uncanny X-Men number 196. If you did, please like the video on YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.